Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
We train men how to split atoms, how to build rocket ships, and how to snipe targets from 5,000 feet away, but we don't train men how to become men. We demand that men become more sensitive, vulnerable, and emotionally available, and then we leave men on their own to unlearn a lifetime of conditioning. We teach men how to compete, how to dominate, how to litigate, but we don't teach men how to access their hearts while also standing in their strength. Many of these voids in modern masculinity can find solutions in ancient, time and battle-tested tools, traditions, and rituals that have already been laid out for us if we're willing to surrender to their teachings. One man who has dedicated a meaningful part of his life to becoming a student of these teachings is our guest on today's show, a friend of mine and Brian's, Kevin Orosz. So who is Kevin Orris? Kevin is a high-performance coach specializing in helping men embark on their hero's journey to masculine mastery. Now, I don't often pull someone's biography directly from their website. I like to use my own words to describe them, but I thought this paragraph was so beautifully laid out that I'm just going to read it word for word. You can find Kevin playing dangerously at the intersection of Eastern wisdom, modern psychology, philosophy, mysticism, and neuroscience. He helps men develop practices that connect them deeper to their purpose and creativity. He coaches programs designed to locate your blocks, reveal the doorway, and access the keys to unlocking your magical potential through simple and profound shifts. Damn, man, I want Kevin's copywriter for the bio on my website. I think actually those were his own words. He's a pretty talented guy, as you'll come to hear on the show. He is also the host of the Revolution podcast, which I've been a guest on, and it's a show focused on masculinity, evolutionary psychology, mysticism, sex, and how language can create your reality. Now, in this episode today, we talk about why you don't need to hit some dramatic bottom in your life to create change, as long as you listen to the part of you that's screaming for you to hear that there has to be something better than this. Kevin talks about how the world is in dire need of masculine warriors that not only have well-trained bodies and minds, but well-trained hearts. We break down the lie of glorifying the lone wolf, the self-made man, the one who does it all on their own. The reality is the lone wolf starves. Even the lone wolf who is financially successful can starve in connection. And we talk about how and why so many men live this pattern of boom and bust, oscillating from going full throttle to full disengagement in life, from 110% to then complete burnout, and how to break that exhaustive cycle. Now, Kevin is a student of a lot of the great teachers of masculinity, of psychology, of mythology. You're going to hear him reference a number of them today who you may not be familiar with. So to provide some context for your understanding later in the episode, you're going to hear Kevin reference Campbell. That's Joseph Campbell, who wrote the book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. If you've ever heard of the term, the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell came up with that term, the hero's journey, and it's predicated on the thousands of hero stories that we've heard through all of mythology, through some of our media and television. For example, Star Wars, Luke Skywalker went through the hero's journey. You have Tom Cruise in Top Gun goes through the hero's journey, Forrest Gump, Neo in The Matrix. Even though the faces are different, the hero's journey is comprised of the same elements. There's an ordinary world. The world changes. The hero has to go into this descent of figuring out who he or she is. The old self is broken down. The new self is reconstituted. And then that hero returns to the ordinary world as a different changed being, and then has to relate to the surroundings in a new way and carries that teachings back and makes the environment around him or her better. So that's the story of the hero of 1,000 faces. That's Campbell. You're going to hear him reference Moore. Moore is Robert Moore, who wrote the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover alongside Douglas Gillette. And that's a book about rediscovering the archetypes of the mature masculine. And then finally, you're going to hear him talk about Jung, Carl Jung, who's one of the, you could call him godfathers of modern psychology. Everyone has heard of Sigmund Freud. Carl Jung, for many people, is considered to be even maybe potentially more influential, and his teachings may be more enduring and practical and actually have withstood the test of time, at least in some respects, more effectively than Sigmund Freud's. So Carl Jung is referenced by Kevin a number of different times, and that's more of the psychological teachings that he relies upon. So with that as your background, with that as your context, I invite you to enjoy this conversation with Kevin Orosz around the ancient elements of masculine mastery. Kevin, I think the only way to start this conversation is for Brian and I to share some condolences with you about where you have been trapped this last year of your life. It sounds like it's been like a real trial and tribulation for you. So do you want to take a moment to just vent about that, buddy?
It's been a real challenge, and I appreciate all the support, all my beloved family that has supported me through the absolute excruciating pandemic experience on the island of the gods, Bali, Indonesia. You know, I snuck in right before quarantine, locked the airport, and it has been a grueling campaign of organic food, tribe, holistic healing, and pure nature. I mean, woo.
If somebody were to write a book for the next pandemic of what to do, you did it right. You get stuck in a heavenly space, and then you're like, well, I can't leave because there's a pandemic. I mean, it's fantastic.
I mean, to be fair, Spirit guided me. I was in Austin, Texas, playing ping pong, had a couple of ice cold cruisers, and my other flight got canceled. It was like 4 a.m. I was with Ryan and Jordan, actually, who y'all know. People were screaming at me from Bali. They're like, dude, if you want, because I was planning on spending 3 to 6 months there as it was, but certainly not a year. They were like, get a flight now. Australia just closed. This was like back when we weren't sure there was going to be a lockdown. And so instead of being, stupid and being like, nah, I'll wait, 5 more days, I literally booked a flight for the next afternoon. So I slept for 2 to 3 hours, rushed to my hotel, packed, and I was on a plane, and I barely made it.
Who won ping pong?
I got destroyed.
Got it. Fair enough. That's why you left. That's why you were embarrassed. You booked a flight. You went to Bali. I get it.
Yeah.
And it's funny how small this world of personal development can be, because, we just released an episode recently with Lila Donalo called How to Ask for What You Want in Bed. I think it's episode 223 or so. And when you told me, Kevin, that you were in Bali before we started recording, I'm like, oh, we just did an episode with Lila. And you're like, yeah, I saw her walking out of the spa today. It's just like this world. I mean, you couldn't get any further away from where we are right now than in Bali. And then here we are interviewing two people who are now in each other's orbit. It's kind of mind blowing how connected we are.
The world is not small, but it is very, very connected.
I like that. That seems to make sense to me. Before we dive in, Kevin, about masculine mastery, which I think is a really important conversation for our listeners to have. I know this is a big passion of yours. One of the things that people ask me often is why I love Bulletproof coffee so much, in addition to how tasty it is and the level of creativity I feel and the buzz in my system that I get while drinking it. I also like to point to the fact that it has actually helped me to forge deep and meaningful relationships with some badass people in my life. And our origin story actually goes back to having met you when you were an ambassador for Bulletproof. You want to just quickly tell our guys how that chance encounter happened?
Yeah. I mean, I drank mine this morning. I'm still a disciple, and I've worked it into my lifestyle. I think it's a total game changer. For those that don't know, it's fair trade organic coffee blended with coconut MCT oil and grass-fed butter or ghee. And then there's 100 different variations. Yeah, I was really, really blessed to have met my bros, Jordan and Ryan Bowditch, who were my dear brothers and business partners in Mystic Misfit at that time. And we also were ambassadors for Bulletproof Coffee. So we got flown all over the country, not just coffee, but their whole range of supplements, biohacking tech, and all this stuff. And we got a week in Manhattan. And who comes waltzing into the Whole Foods, stoked and full of energy and a glint in his eye? Old Dom. We knocked back a couple coffees, and a couple hours later, we were inviting you to a workshop we were literally hosting in 3 days, where I also met Brian. So can't make this shit up.
this is one of the many things that makes you so fascinating to me, Kevin. And, the word fascinate is a big word, right? There's certain people who are interesting, and it's kind of like, I'm intrigued by you. Maybe I'll look at your stuff and, every once in a while you'll give me something to think about. But this word of fascination evokes something deeper, more magical, right? There's like an aura, there's an element, and you have a number of these fascinating elements, whether it's your physical appearance, what you wear. You also have this like gift of freestyling, which I was talking to you about before we hit record. And Kevin has this, like, how Eminem freestyles, like Kevin's got this linguistic magic that can captivate you, and he just free flows. And when I met you that first day and you invited me to that rooftop experience where you're like, hey, we're going to do something cool. Don't ask too many questions. It's going to be badass. Bring a friend. And for some reason, I said yes to that. I would never say yes to an invitation like that to someone I just met. And I was like, Brian, you need to come along to this thing. I think this is going to be cool, or it could be a complete disaster. I have no idea. And we end up on this rooftop, badass place in Manhattan where there was like 20 other people like me and Brian that you had just randomly met over the course of that week.
A lot of them at that Whole Foods.
Right? That you had just invited. And they also felt something about you that made them say, yes, I'm going to dedicate a Saturday night pre-pandemic, where they had options, and said that they were going to come to this experience. And you, Ryan, and Jordan created this moment where complete strangers broke down barriers and had an opportunity to connect through eye gazing, through exercises where we connected with one another. So maybe if you can just talk a little bit about how do you create these magical environments for connection, and what is it about that lights you up in your life?
Yeah, it's so beautiful remembering that evening, because it was a powerful one. I think we started in Washington Square Park. Yeah, just jamming acoustic. And then we led everybody to our Airbnb, which no one knew, and then to the roof, and went through an entire evening. And that was a real golden age in our lifestyles, in my lifestyle. And Ryan and Jordan, we formed this brand, Mystic Misfit, which was all about cultivating connection through events, workshops. And we actually ended up doing group coaching experiences as well. And at that time, this was only a year or two after my travels through Asia. So I was still fairly fresh out of time I spent in India and Nepal, where I ended up getting my yoga teacher training and doing all the yoga stuff, breathwork, asana under Iyengar schooling. And then also the guru, or the philosophy teacher, was a sannyasin from the Osho lineage. So everyone's, I assume, has seen Wild Wild Country, one of the best documentaries of all time on Netflix. And despite all the drama and politics, his meditation techniques are based on Wilhelm Reich and his student Alexander Lowen, breathwork, bioenergetics. So what I started to realize, and then I followed up with that training and did a lot more intensives later when I got to the States. So basically what those events in my mind, when I was designing those with Ryan and Jordan, was how can we create the most connection possible in a village or tribe, a group of people, maybe strangers. Like that case, it was strangers. Back in San Diego and LA, it was, our friend groups, which strangers showed up, but that one was one of the most experimental. And it turns out it's very, very, very simple. Radical authenticity, vulnerability, eye contact, breath, and a shared narrative or framework, container, or story. So this is where that kind of mysterious element, we didn't tell everyone what we were doing. It's not like a party, like, all right, drinks at 7. And then, we literally walked everyone to the roof, set intentions, watched the sunset, walked straight into these experiences that for a lot of people made them very uncomfortable. Meeting a stranger in Manhattan on a Saturday night, and then eye gazing with them and telling them what they least want them to know about them.
Dude, way before the eye gazing, you had us on the rooftop in a circle standing up. You put one person in the middle and said to start screaming what you were feeling. That's how we kicked it off.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
I was like, these guys are insane. This is crazy. Let's do it.
What's beautiful is like someone like you, or like, I remember both of y'all that evening. And that energy of like, this is crazy, or the dropping of social mask and persona is the magnetic energy that cultivates that, oh shit energy, right? The euphoria, the Greeks called this communitas. It's actually the dissolution of the self and like the me, and then you join the we and you go into a group flow state.
Yes. Yeah, I love that term, communitas. I remember reading about it, and I think it was one of the books that either you or Ryan recommended to me called The Archetype of Initiation by Robert Moore. And they talk about these experiences where like say in New York City in 9/11, where there's like this massive travesty happening, communitas emerges because it doesn't matter if you're the CEO or if you're the homeless person or whatever, like in that moment, we're all the same. We're all Americans. We're all New Yorkers trying to survive this moment. And then to create these experiences where people can come together, conscious experiences that don't require a disaster or an attack, but like, a retreat where people can come together and drop the fact that I'm a doctor and I'm socially really important, or I'm this person who's an afterthought in society. We all come together on equal playing field and connect on something deeper. That requires like a certain kind of an acumen to create that space. And I think this is a good bridge, Kevin, to get into this conversation around one of the teaching platforms that you like to stand on, which is teaching masculine mastery. And perhaps before I, dive into anything specific, I think it might be even helpful to hear, how do you define masculine mastery, and why do you find it so important to teach it right now?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. And I should lead with, I'm teaching it because I most want to learn it. And I'm also teaching my past self. Like, this is what I wish had been given to me age 18 to 21, age 25, etc. Now, the School of Hard Knocks is a beautiful university. I'm sure you've been in attendance also. Many people have. But what's sad about our culture and all of its technological and economic brilliance, we don't train men how to be men. And I'm not talking about, get out there and be a linebacker, get out there on Wall Street, make the money. I'm talking about the integrated masculine entity, the male-bodied entity, invitation for all non-binary folks to situate themselves. Everyone has masculine energy. The masculine entity is an entity that grows and matures in the presence of other masculine entities, specifically mentors, elders, and specifically the rituals and the rites of initiation, or the rites of passage. So this is where, when I teach it, it's at a very introductory level, because the deep work you have to do in person, and usually have to do with an elder. So this is something in my own life. I want to become a good elder to my sons, other men. And so I'm seeking good elders. And then at the level of my competence, I'm teaching other men at or below my level who want to understand how to be a better lover and relate to women and the feminine, right? It's a massive one. How to relate to purpose and mission.
So we're talking about elders being in person. And what I'm curious about is, what do you see as the status quo today? Like, what is it that guys are getting? And so we're not being taught, understood. Like, what is it that we're getting, and what's that getting us to?
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I can speak about my experience, and I assume a lot of men share it. I learned what a good man was by watching my dad. And then watching Hollywood action heroes, right? The cop and the cop drama, these persona character archetypes that are pumped at us in media from all directions. As soon as we start to understand what's on the screens, what people are paying attention to, we're forming a model, right? We're forming a meta model of, okay, this is what our culture does, and that's a man. And then sexually, a lot of it comes from porn culture, the romantic comedy culture. Or very young, it's Disney culture, Prince Charming. That's a big program for the sexual relating space. And then the economic space, right? It's the American dream, the hustler, the CEO, the lone wolf entrepreneur. Against all odds, he breaks his balls and stays up all night, and he makes $1 million and gets the girl and da-da-da-da-da-da. That's, to me, the American mythos of the masculine, and where it's led young men and the mental health crisis with men, which, I'm sure you gentlemen have encountered these statistics: suicide rate, prison populations, rate of violent crime and death, depression, anxiety, addiction. It's orders of magnitude larger for men. And that's not by accident.
All of those influences that you mentioned, those resonate. Lone wolf, CEO, the Hollywood masculine star, how dad does it, right? Like all of that. And with that, for me at least, has come with some beliefs of, okay, like not only is this what I should be doing, but like if I don't do that, then I'm something else. And then I'm ostracized from the group. And so when you say things like this has to be done with elders and this has to be done with a group, and I love that you brought in this kind of masculinity matures with a group, that's huge. Because the types of group I know that Dominic was part of growing up, that I was part of growing up, it was how far can we knock someone down, not how far can we bring the standard up.
Yeah. And Kevin, when you talk about those statistics, right, of men's mental health and who's in prisons. It's men who are the ones creating violent crimes. These are men. Suicide, the ones who are most successful in terms of like who carry it through to the end, it's men. Whenever I heard those statistics, I got it, but it didn't connect with me because I'm like, I'm not any of those things. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm this high performing dude who's making good money, has social standing, whatever. And like that never really resonated with me. So I saw those as problems of masculinity, but like could never really connect to it. And it's when I started to recognize that my part of that narrative was I couldn't feel myself. Like I didn't feel a drive. That's not true. I was driven to to succeed, but I didn't feel that like fire for life. I didn't feel connected or in love with my life. And the only times I really felt alive were when I was sexually acting out. I would feel a blip when I'd close a big sales deal. And I think like a lot of men can relate to, I'm not on these extremes. I'm not killing people. I'm not beating my spouse. I'm not bottoming out with alcohol, but I'm also not really in love with my life. What about the subtleties? Can we speak to the subtleties that a lot of men may be experiencing, that just kind of the trudgery of life sometimes?
Yeah, 100%. And this is the far reaching, because those statistics, while they are pretty gnarly to face, they are in a minority, I would say, of the masculine experience. Most men are where you're talking about. They're grayed out, right? It's not even black and white or like technicolor. They're grayed out. It's just kind of like, all right, I got to hustle. Why do you work so hard? Well, to pay the bills. It's like, why are you motivated to pay the bills? Well, because I got to work. It's like this recursive loop of living out this same day-to-day thing. The relationships may or may not be satisfying. They may have a couple beers with the guys. There's male companionship. It's not very deep relation to the absolute or the sublime, whether they're religious or not, to God or higher purpose. It's kind of vague. This is where I found myself in university. I was getting ready for grad school. And in my story, it hit like a ton of bricks. I got to a level of like insomnia, anxiety, depression. My girlfriend cheated on me at the time. And like my breaking point was there has to be something more than this, because I was staring down, 6-figure debt and grad school and prestige. And like you said, I wasn't feeling anything. It was a numbing. And what's really wild, and this is spoken about in Moore's work a lot, it's in Iron John as well, Robert Bly's seminal book. When you meet a man, and this is the beauty, we didn't evolve to be these lone wolf hunter types. Okay. The lone hunter, the lone wolf starves. That's a myth, and not a good myth, because I love mythology and myths. This is a lie. It's that kind of fib. We're pack animals. We're social. We're tribal, village, especially the masculine. We couldn't bring down big game. We couldn't plan economically or plan war, which is historically what men kind of did and still do in a lot of ways by ourselves. You need other men. So when you meet a man who's living his potential and his dream and doesn't give a fuck and is excited and is competent, what we call that is like the golden charge or the transference. You will see that man and you'll feel something and you'll be like, oh, fuck. It'll awaken something in you. And I'm sure you guys can remember that moment.
Yeah. Even as you speak about it, Kevin, I got chills down my spine just thinking about that type of man. And Brian, I would say, you and I have been in the parts of our lives where we felt like Kevin did, that kind of like that disconnection. I think you said your breaking point was there has to be something more than this, right? And I think that is much more relatable than like the bottoming out or the, imploding or exploding. I think most men can really relate to that. Brian, I know what it's like now to feel that conviction, that clarity and competency of going after what we want in life. And people have responded. People have responded to us differently since we've taken that path. Would you say? I
would say that. My bottoming out looked just slightly different. Same track, a little different flavor. I couldn't tell you what I actually wanted in life. I didn't know. I was like, this kind of feels good. I want to get the promotion. Why do I want to get the promotion? What if I had $1 billion? I started asking, what do I do with that? I don't even know. So that was my track. Kevin, you mentioned that what did you call it? The golden charge?
Yeah.
You can feel that in people when you meet them. It feels calming. It feels reassuring. It feels inspiring. And there's been only a few people in my life that I have met that are like that. Kevin's one of those guys. And here's the crazy thing. I didn't even need to know what Kevin's passion was. I didn't need to know what his golden charge was. I could just feel it. And there's only been a few people in life I've met like that. And you're right. When around those people, it helps bring clarity to what maybe is missing in my life, or directionally, like what could be. And I know, Kevin, we mentioned before we hit the record button here, you were one of the first people to lead us in this Wim Hof type breathing with music and with a group. And like, that's something I won't forget. That's something that's carried through my life for the last 3 years. So I love that you put words to that feeling, because I haven't had that before.
Thank you. I mean, I had a visceral experience of this myself, that I grew up very intellectual and like reserved and shy as a boy. And like sometimes that part of me still comes out, although now I love to express and create. But I'll never forget, I'd read All the Young. I still to this day, I mean, sitting next to me is one of his books. I love Carl Jung. I think his work is deeply, deeply important for the masculine specifically. But the golden charge, while it's amazing, it's a type of transference. So transference is basically when you project psychic material that's unmanifest in you onto someone else who's manifesting it. And it's a bridge. A lot of projection and transference can be negative. We all probably can remember a time where that happened with a partner or a girlfriend or a wife or a boss, blah, blah, blah. But this is actually a positive kind of transference if you can identify and rework it. So I'll never forget. And I was actually on some psychedelic sacrament. I was in the forests of Oregon at this beautiful transformational festival called Beloved. This was when I wanted to go to grad school. So like the penultimate for me was the academic achiever, right? And so this other brother that was in our camp, we were going in between music stages, and it was like early in the night. We were like trying to plan our route. It was like Burning Man in the Tidewater, Oregon, rainforest there, basically. And I'll never forget, he like said something that hit me like a ton of bricks. He was giving this poetic, beautiful riff about how the feminine just wants to feel the masculine's leadership. And like, we were like talking about what girls we were attracted to. And like, he said it in a way that it landed and like gut punched me. And the way his confidence was exuding, he was like leading the group. And my golden charge just it like zoomed in on him. And I was just, in this altered state. So I was like, holy shit. That was like, it was overpowering. And I named it. I was just like, bro. And I said it. And he just looked at me with this like fierce look. And he's like, brother, that's just your projection. And like gave me all the energy back. Like he gave all the attention, and I was giving away my own energy to him in this transference thing. And he gave it right back. And it popped something inside me where I just realized, the classic cliche we've all heard, if you spot it, you got it. Why I was responding to what was happening is because that was unmanifest in me. And specifically with Sacred Sons, which is a beautiful men's work organization, which, by the way, if y'all are ever in Austin, or San Diego, I'd love to connect you with those brothers, Albert, Jason, and Adam, the co-founders.
We're actually heading down for our mastermind to Austin, Texas in May for our immersion. So that might be a great time to meet those guys.
Yes, I would love to set up the intro, especially with Albert, who's there, just had a baby. Anyway, so one of the exercises we've done with them, and I personally had to facilitate some of this, was naming the charges in a room of like 30, 40 men. So a lot of them are negative. It's like, fuck you, I don't like you, I want to fight you. And you come into connection and you pop that charge off of that man, because it's not about him, it's about you.
Wait a minute. So like, I want to really get this down. So like there's a circle of 40 men. You stand in the middle and you go around one man at a time. And it's just like this, whatever charge is just on the surface. Like you see some dude and maybe you had like no interaction with him, but you saw the way that he walked or the way he entered the room or the way he talks. And then you just go right at him and say, fuck you, I don't like you, I want to fight you.
Well, that's one way to do it. I mean, this is a beautiful technology, and I'll break it down super, super quick, ESPN style. So probably y'all can refacilitate this. This blew my mind, and shout out to the Sacred Sons brothers for showing me this. I think it's Mankind Project influenced as well. Basically, you go into a breathwork ritual or state, and then everyone just walks around the room and makes eye contact, no talking. So that's kind of like the sensing phase. So you'll notice that man that you're like, I don't like the way that guy's looking at me. You're like, whoa, this guy's intimidating me. Or, wow, I really want to talk to that guy, but I'm shy. Whatever. You notice all this shit. And then in the circle, not every man goes up, but there's like kind of the facilitator's like, who's got the most charge? You just know, like you look at one of the guys and he's like itching out of his skin. So you identify those brothers And then you start to have the process, and there's like more layers you can fill in the blank with, where you identify who's the charge with and why. And there may be like 3 guys on one, like one person might be holding a lot of charge. And then you basically get it down to, the men meeting in a neutral posture, open, relaxed posture, eye contact. And there's a staff in the middle. And the invitation is to go into like the energetic, like not combat, but like the dojo, and unleash, like, I don't fucking like you because you said this earlier and it triggered me. And then let the projections fly. You pause, you give the other man a chance to respond. Like, what are you noticing? What are you feeling? He responds. And then the invitations to pop the projection off, which the only way to do that is just full ownership, and to intensify the emotion that's attached to the story. So you start to see shamanic type shit happening. So a man will be like, fuck you, I want to punch you in the mouth. And there's like this aggressive charge. But then when the guy takes ownership, it's like, what's under that? What's under that? And the facilitator, the space holding, he just starts bursting into tears. And it's like, you remind me of my dad who used to hit me, and this starts happening. And what happens is the men, like, that's an entry point for real brotherhood and allyship, because they're popping off these false stories and programs that if you're walking around, in Manhattan or Austin or LA and you have no technology like this, people think that's reality.
What you're describing in this men's group, in this kind of tribal ceremony, like, for our listeners, what I want people to understand is, like, this is the training ground. This is where we grow, and it can be taken into our everyday life. I've seen this done now, not to this extent because that's the training ground, but those skills can be transferred to the corporate world, right? Could you imagine if you're able to work through things opposed to living in our stories within families and relationships? I have not trained at that level, even within a men's group, and I'm desiring to do so now because I know how powerful that could be throughout the rest of my life in the very real world scenarios.
I mean, Kevin, you talk about how we need better training around masculine warriors, right? Because we train men's bodies. We go to the gym, we put ourselves through hell. We train men's minds, read books, study things, become expert in our fields, but we don't train the heart. This exercise that you're talking about, I believe to be one of the, I would say, kind of advanced level heart training experiences, because what we're talking about is naming truth or projection. So getting to truth. At first, it's projection. And I can't tell you how many men that are in our masterminds or in our Facebook groups that we're starting to get to know, who are walking around with so much fucking anger, and they don't even realize it's here. They are on the surface. There's a thin layer of filament, and right underneath that filament is like a reservoir of anger from eating shit sandwiches, from not speaking their truths, from trying to be political, from trying to be the good person, and never have the opportunity to say what this guy said. Fuck you, I don't like you. And I don't even know why. And then for someone to hold strong masculine space, to be like, that's safe to say here. What's underneath that? And then to get to that, holy shit, I got unresolved stuff with my father. I'm totally projecting onto you. Thank you for allowing me that. Now I can bond with you because of that. You've been in these settings. You train other men through this heart-centered training around warrior mentality. Why is that so important? I'll let you take that wherever you think is necessary to go, but what's missing and why is that so important?
Yeah, this is big. It's interesting because I forget the tribe, but there's a tribe in the Amazon, they're hunters. They hunt monkeys and, other animals there, and they're killing, right? The Western culture is about soldiers. So soldiers are not warriors. And this is not at all a diss. Like a lot of my best friends are veterans, and I give full respect and honor to people that are in the armed forces. That being said, the soldier mentality, and, we can look at the stats for veterans and PTSD, that's a whole nother wormhole. The soldier is different than the warrior archetype. And the warrior, and this is why I like the term guardian, which is even the next level where, basically, long story short, in this language, this indigenous First Nation people, when they talk about killing, so they go into nature to kill, to feed the tribe and to hunt, they talk about they have to kill with their heart. And so actually, like when you kill from the mind, that's when you're in disconnection and you do harm to yourself. When you kill from the heart, it's actually, and this is hunting, right? So it's animals. When it's human beings, that's a whole nother thing. And I don't know if that's justified. Obviously, in self-defense is where I would imagine it has to be justified to protect yourself and your kin. But that's a wormhole. That's where the warrior and the heart intersect, though, at like a visceral level. Because I'm sure someone's listening to this and they're like, this is all great kumbaya bullshit. But what about like the warrior energy, which is like a fighter, a protector, a guardian who's physically able to provide and protect? And that is 100% necessary in our culture. It's 100% important that men are able of body and strategic of mind. And the fundamental experience, and psychology, you can go into neuroscience. There's a lot of evidence that between age 0, so in the womb, in utero, and when you're born to age 7, most of your experiences and most of the energy in the nervous system is surrounding emotion and emotional experiences, and the high and low emotion that surrounds creativity and empathy and those mirror neurons firing and oxytocin and bonding and trauma. Fear, panic, terror, pain, anger, sadness, so the emotional intelligence of the masculine must catch up to the brilliant masculine minds that have split the atom and built stealth bombers and spacecraft and have mastered economics in the material world. And, like the Usain Bolts and the LeBron James that physically are like these superhumans. Meanwhile, emotional intelligence, EQ, emotional resilience. And then if you want to get into the fun and like the super creative layers, the tantric man, the man who's able to use his emotional energy and his heart and his empathy with the feminine at a very high level of co-creation and sensation and love. This is one of those evolutions. And, I should say something quick about the 60s and the generation that precedes us and the men's movement, so to speak. The men in the 60s, when the cultural revolution broke out and the counterculture of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, the men swung fully to the feminine. Well, fuck it, man. We're going to smoke some chiba, grow our hair out, and just play music. Fuck it. I quit my job. They went full feminine. That was part of the journey. But now you hear women, I'm sure you guys hear it all the time. Women in the spiritual community are like, where are all the men? I want a masculine man. I want a firm, strong, directed man who can provide and provision and protect. I don't want a guy that's wearing white all the time and drinking cacao and, is basically trapped in his anima, to use the Jungian term, his inner feminine.
Dominic's wearing white, and I know he loves cacao. So I don't know if you're doing it wrong, Dominic, or what the situation is. But
I'm mainly making fun of myself because, I'm living in that culture here in Bali.
Yeah. That's part of the fascination, right, with you, Kevin, is that you have that side to you, and you also have this other wild side. I want to dream for just 1 second, because this all sounds good, like having these strong masculine men. But on this show, it's helpful to think in extremes. And so, Kevin, I would love to hear your take on what this world looks like if more men, maybe all the men, were doing this work and working through that EQ part. So we've got the brain figured out, we've got the physical figured out at different levels. What happens when your work becomes everybody's work?
Yeah, this is a beautiful vision that our hearts know is possible. Now, I don't know what it's going to look like. There's going to be some messy elements to it. But I think you already spoken to some of the areas that could most use it because they're stewarding a lot of the wealth, corporations. So for example, like just to pick a snapshot, a disagreement occurs, a clusterfuck, as we call it in the biz, or something happens where there is irreconcilable, right? Founder issues or like relational issues. Instead of wasting all the money, backstabbing, breaking relationships, numbing with addiction, numbing with sex, all these escape strategies, we set up dojos. And it's seen as no different than, if you need to do a think tank or like an R&D technological, like, hardcore research and development type mode, we would do that with relating and language and emotion. And we would use tools like breath work and binaural beats and biohacking and freezing cold water and somatic experiencing. You might have to beat the shit out of a pillow in front of your CEO and sob. And maybe even do some combo or some hape or do a little ceremony. You can bring in all these technologies, but the idea is we do it in connection. So what it actually looks like, what's the mindfuck of all of this? The mindfuck of modern culture is that the future looks a lot like the past. Now, it doesn't mean we all wear loincloths and sing Kumbaya in the jungle, but it does mean that like these ancient tribes that stuck together through some really gnarly shit, like being hunted by animals and other tribes and starving and freezing to death and getting poisoned by animals and plants. Our ancestors survived some crazy ass shit, and they had technology to move massive grief. They had technology to move terror when the tribe went through terror. Or, somebody slept with the chieftain's second wife, that guy's going to get killed. Wait, let's come into connection, go through the ritual, fight him, don't kill him, wear some war paint, cry about it, best friends the next day. There's technologies available for humans to meet really irreconcilable emotional and relating issues in connection, move through it, navigate it, and actually come through the other side more intimate.
It's so wild. I think about some of the corporate spaces I've been in, and just about everyone has what they call a war room. Like, wild name, but it's called a war room, right? This is where everybody gets together. There's usually a big conference table, and you work through the business problems, right? Or you put the plan together. You do the pitch or the presentation in the war room. And so what I hear you saying, Kevin, is like, what if we had a space literally dedicated to the working out of the conflict? My background is in HR strategy, and we've seen studies that show that 70% of energy is wasted in what they call the drama triangle, which is either where somebody's being a hero, a victim, or some sort of like self-sabotager. 70%. So like what this could look like very tactically is using the technologies and tools that you're talking about to resolve, to work through these 70% issues, right? And then where would we be as a society? Where would the corporation be? If you're giving us an extra 70% by using these tools, that sounds really powerful.
And let's dig in a little bit further on the thread that you opened up, Kevin, about, like in the 60s, the men went full feminine and explored that. And now, the women right now are kind of like, where are all the men? Where are the masculine men who can lead? Where are the men who are grounded? Where are the men who are certain? I know that there are a lot of guys right now who are fucking confused because it's like, well, you want me to be the guy who's out crushing the job and I'm spending 70 hours a week going out and doing this thing. But then you also want me to be sensitive and to cry, but not when I'm leading. And it's like, when I do cry, you're upset about that. It's like, can we talk to the guys about what are the new rules around masculinity and what are some of the areas that we should be thinking about training? And what are some of the common complaints that we should start to do, that we can start to dispel and educate our listeners on?
Yeah, this is great. And, I'm learning this in real time. So I'm just speaking into my own edges and embodying it myself. And then obviously I have the pleasure, as I know you gentlemen do, with training and coaching people. So I get these like streams of data in real time from all my clients and the students in my courses. And yeah, I'm tracking this in my podcast. I'm constantly interviewing and talking to people like you, where I'm like, wow, like this is a meta trend. Machismo doesn't work. The mainstream media and the culture wars right now wants to call toxic masculinity machismo. Suck it up. Don't be a pussy. Never talk about your feelings. Fucking dominate, conquer, we all know that. That obviously doesn't work. It's a very outmoded form of masculinity. But what you just described, when I was bringing up, also doesn't work. This completely feminine man who goes with the flow and there's not a lot of assertion. And there might even be like some victim or like bypassing tendencies. And, a lot of men have tried that out. That doesn't work. So we have to find a balance. And one of the phrases I really like that anthropologists use, they call it tender aggressive, but I like to upgrade it to tender assertive men. And this is a quality of the alpha male when you look at a tribe or structure, community dynamic, and some people don't like the term alpha male or beta male, or, nowadays there's this whole thing about sigma males. If you guys are tracking the men's space right now, the sigma male is a new one coming on. Sigma male is kind of the balance, right? So tender assertive is basically the idea of an old school alpha who is assertive or aggressive. So when stuff needs to get done, he's there to get it done. Strong boundaries, goal orientation, command, single point of focus. So you can't distract him. You can't stop him. If there's a barrier, he's going to solve it. He's moving towards the target. Masculine qualities, great. Really good in business, really good in sexual dating dynamics, really good in competition with other men, whether it's sports, market, economics, etc. Now, the tender side is the one that is a little trickier to work into this, because the tender side is like, all right, you're on Wall Street. You're slanging cash and checks all day. You're savage. You have strong boundaries. You're embodying these qualities. But when you get home and the wife's there and she's soft and she's supple and there's sexuality and there's desire, or there's a relaxation in the nest, go into tender and take off the armor. And so that transition, especially for the male nervous system, which, you got to pay respect to Mother Nature. Our nervous system didn't evolve to cuddle in bed with a woman all day and talk about our feelings. It evolved to survive in an extremely ancestrally hostile environment, extremely fast thinking, problem solving, neocortex, targeting, all the combat available things that you would need if you were living in the jungle. This is how the male nervous system is wired. And not a lot has changed. Culture's changed a lot, but the biology is all there. This is where, come home. Do you have a ritual? Do you have a practice? Do you have language techniques? Are you able to down-regulate your nervous system? Are you able to set boundaries with a female, with your colleagues, with your children, with et cetera? And then once you transition and state change and you move into that environment, can you still lead? Because a lot of men, they'll completely just go limp and just be like, oh, give me the beer. Like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to talk about whatever. Now you got to show up at home and lead the marriage or lead the family. This is where that integration takes place. And I think a lot of men have that as their work right now with a capital W.
I love this. And what's coming up for me as you're sharing this is almost a man's relationship with himself, with these energies. So for example, I see a lot of guys who can thrive when they're in 100% of that typical masculine energy. So it's go mode, slay dragons, get shit done, take no prisoners. And then eventually there's a burnout moment, right? Like their life has dropped, whether it's their relationship, their physical well-being, their health, or mental health. And then they flop to this other side to try and counterbalance it. So it's this complete other end of the spectrum where now there's kind of like let me disengage. And so now I'm floating around. I'm not caring as much. Or we'll hear people say, I just stopped giving a fuck. And there's also there's almost the celebration of not giving a fuck when it's actually you're just disconnected and disengaged from your life at that point. And then that runs its course. And then you flop back into the hyper accelerated mode again. And you just do it all over again. And I used to be kind of that boom, burst, boom, burst, boom, burst. And what I've learned, like the Sigma terminology, that tender assertiveness, is really connecting with me because when I found my middle path, it was when I knew when I'm going to battle that I'm putting those blinders on, I'm getting shit done, nothing is standing in my way. But when that battle's over, then I know how to drop into my recovery zone. And it's going to be glorious. I know what to eat. I know how I'm going to sleep. I know the people I'm going to surround myself with. I know the time I'm going to take off. And I'm going to clear that path so that my battery is recharging. My tank is full. I become fully magnetic again. Burnout is not and never will be again in the rest of my life ever something that I will ever have to worry about because I found that middle path. And
this is a big point, Dominic, because when I hear things like, now I got to come home and now I got to lead here and now how am I going to do this? It's like, holy shit, I just did that. I was just doing that all day long at my job. And you know what? Maybe I do need to relax. And it sounds like work. But what you're describing is actually like the practice, the building of the rituals, making that part of it easier and actually becoming energized by those sort of things. And I'd be curious, Dominic, did it take you time and energy to get there?
yes.
Right. Talk about that a little bit.
Like anytime Kevin, maybe you can weigh in on this too, but anytime you're learning to overcome an old pattern, it requires the extra energy expenditure to learn what is it like to say, when I used to say yes to everything, because I also thought that made me a Superman, to then start saying no. And then the mental churn of, am I no longer as tough as I thought I was? Am I no longer as badass? Am I becoming weak? Am I slowing down with age? Is someone else going to pass me by? Having to really sit with all of that in the short term is absolutely something that caused me some anguish, especially in our culture. Like what Kevin was saying before, we applaud the lone wolf. We applaud the guy who gets no sleep at night and, has bags under his eyes. And I had to really sit with that and then get to the other side of that journey where I was just like, oh, this feels fucking awesome. And I had to have trust and faith. And this is where the mentorship, Kevin, the leadership of others who had come before me that taught me that these were the ways that were available. If I didn't know that someone else had gone through that before me and had come out the other side, then I probably would have lost faith or not wanted to take the risk in the first place to break from something unfamiliar and then fail and not know what was coming out the other side.
100%. And this is the hardest part for a lot of men. And I know there's brothers listening that are working in corporate or raising a family, and they feel like they can't shift the energy because they're the provider or they're locked into the pattern, right? And that's not true. Now, if you're living in energy scarcity, it's going to be an uphill battle. For example, you're not getting enough sleep. You're not hydrated. You're not physically fit, whatever it is. And the good news is that you can start now, today, and take the action. As a biohacker, what's the massive force factor that's going to shift all of it? Probably sleep, followed by diet, followed by exercise, followed by your sex life. I just made that up right now. That's been my experience with clients also, my own and theirs. When you have energy deficiency, it'll feel like it's an uphill battle. And that's coupled with what you described, Dom, which is when you rewire a pattern, a neural pathway, you're fighting a serotonergic momentum and inertia because your neurons are literally wired and firing together to do that thing that you've always done, which is burn out like dad did, or like you saw in the media, or like everyone at work's doing. And then you have the added layer, and this is where it really takes balls of steel and courage to break these patterns as a man. If you start shifting and like taking care of your body, shifting your diet, sleeping differently, saying no to going out drinking late when you know you need to get your practices in, whatever, the other guys might feel threatened. They might be like, what's up with you? And that energy will come at you. And so you have layers of this journey. And that's why it is a hero's journey. You have to take a heroic stance, not an egoic megalomaniac grandiosity stance. That's the Hollywood shadow projection of the hero. I mean, the self-sacrifice, disciplined, holistic man who's like, I'm doing this for me because I love myself and my relations, and I'll do whatever it takes. Very different place.
Kevin, if we could use inclusive language here, I only have one ball. You said balls. It's a minor infraction,
Great.
But if we could use that, it'd be great.
Flag on the field.
Yeah. So one of your brothers, Jordan, and his partner, Alexa, we had her on the podcast maybe right towards the beginning of the pandemic. She shared a practice that they go through called the relationship board meeting. On the podcast, I thought this was brilliant. So I implemented it with my partner. Going into that relationship board meeting, we do this on Sunday mornings. It took a lot of energy. I was afraid I was going to get laughed at, like this was a bad idea. It took a lot of energy to sit down to interrupt what our typical patterns were or our typical schedules were on a Sunday to actually do it. And we didn't do it every Sunday to begin with. But now we're in a groove. I look forward to that. It energizes our relationship, and it's now starting to bubble over because she's telling people about it. And now her parents who've been married for umpteen years, they're like, wait, you do what? Maybe we could do that. And so I look at that as just a really simple example of something that takes that hero's journey just enough to we're going to interrupt the pattern. We're going to try something different. We're going to experiment here a little bit. But then how much energy that comes on the other side of that. So this stuff is very real and can be simple, but not easy.
100%. So yeah, amazing exercise is to go read the creation myths of all these different cultures around the world from ancient times, the Egyptians, the Hopi, the Mayan, the ancient Chinese, and start to notice what cultures put value on and the individuals and the value systems that brought life and meaning to those cultures. It's all about meaning making and narrative for humanity. So in that mode, what I've found is the hero's journey, which appears in all literature, film, mythology, and is in these stories. There's a meta pattern. Campbell called it the monomyth, is playing out for us now. It's not just something you sit and watch on the movie screen. It's not just something you read in a book. And when you start to relate to your life in this way, and specifically with men, because I do a lot of my work is with men. So for the masculine experience, to my mind, this is the most empowering stance you can take towards reality. And it grants great agency and sovereignty in your life, in your sexuality, in your finances, in your purpose, your mission, your mind-body training, your heart, your trust in God or all that is, whatever you want to name it. this is not grandiosity. This is not, Hollywood heroics. This is a deeply committed man who loves himself and creation and is willing to discipline and move towards a goal relentlessly to do so and overcome obstacles and challenges, which we need a lot of this in the world right now. The collective here in 2021, we're in a real doozy. Some would call it the underworld.
And Kevin, that perspective pivot, you said you came to that by going through those creation stories. That's where your perspective shifted. Can you talk a little bit more about that moment?
Well, I mean, that's me providing some evidence that, this is way beyond me and it's way beyond Joseph Campbell. I'm reading the same stuff he was reading. I'm looking at his footnotes. This is old stuff for humanity. Now, where it popped for me is when I applied it in my own life. The classic saying, it's not going to matter until it matters to you. So this is an archetypal framework I work within my online courses and my coaching for clients because it immediately creates a map and a narrative that you can travel along. For example, if you just underwent a breakup or an injury or bankruptcy, or you're feeling lost or confused, or you're stuck in a loop, maybe you've heard part of your loop in this episode. We've named a lot. You have choices. You can become a victim. You can succumb to market and cultural forces. Or with the same exact set of resources and the same exact set of characters in your life, you can become the protagonist. So you're the main character. You're not giving away power to so-and-so or who you voted for, who pays your bills or paycheck, or even your parents or priests or whoever. You're the main character. You decide what happens. And like that montage in the movie where the hero, they realize they're fucked, but they don't stop. They get back up, they train, they ask for support, they ask for help, mentors, allies, humility. This is the way to navigate a masculine life, to my knowledge. And it served me very well. And it served my clients very well. And I really believe that a lot of men in the world, they get to hear this. They need to hear this.
Kevin, who are your clients and who are the ones that you're the most fired up to work with now?
It's a great question because it is shifting. It's funny, as I imagine. I know we've talked about this, Dom, on Instagram. Historically, my best clients, the all-stars that get the results have been women, all-star players. And I'm like, wow, I'm just like in awe. And I've encountered a few executive type men, a few compared to the women, who are the guys that we've been talking and speaking into, coming from game A, old paradigm, facing challenges, addictions, stresses, a burnout cycle, and they're stepping in to vulnerability, humility, and combining these tender assertive traits. And so, these are the men I'm really calling in now and speaking to, and they appear quickly this year. And I'm really grateful to both be leading younger men who, I'm 31 in this body. I'm by no means an elder yet. So I'm learning as I go. But, men that are 25 to 30 right now and in that critical phase in a relationship or a job that they feel like is make or break. I want that man. I want to get on a call with that man.
Nice. How does he get on a call with you?
Yeah. I mean, I'm all over social media. You can search my name, Kevin Orosz, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, or you can go to my website, which is kevinorosz.com, OROSZ. It's the last name. Yeah, I'm really excited about the new program that I'm launching. I'm doing a series of free webinars and masterclasses for the whole month of April, every Sunday, 7 p.m. Pacific time. And it's all about the ruling archetype of evolution, which is the hero's journey. And so I'm going to break down the hero's journey step by step, how to map it, how to work it, where you are and where you want to get to where you're going, and combining that with the 4 archetypes. King, guardian, mystic, lover, which is my version of king, warrior, magician, lover, as many men will know. Yeah, this is a program I've been sitting on, and it's going to become like a signature offering for me. It's what I've already done with one-on-ones, but I'm systematizing it and creating that group curriculum that I'm really, really excited to bring out to the world.
And that program, are you going to leave the registration up by any chance through mid-April so that people can go through?
Yeah, no, it'll still be going by then. So we're perfect.
Great. So I'm going to link all that in the show notes. I'm going to link your website, the Revolution podcast, your Instagram account. Where do they register for the course? Where would that be?
It's masterclass.kevinorosz.com is the registration link. Yeah, if you go to my Instagram or you go to any of the bios on my social media, you'll find it.
I'll link that too. Brian, any final words? It looks like you were about to say something.
No, just that I know in times of my life where I have felt lost, it's been great to have people that have maps and systems put together. Because even if it's not the right path, it's at least the right starting point. So I love that you put this together, Kevin. And yeah, that's it, man. Thanks for sharing your wisdom here and your Balinese background. This is it's been beautiful to look at.
Yeah, I wish I'd give you the tour. I'm so grateful for you gentlemen and what you're holding down for the masculine. You guys are bridgers. You're bridging worlds. And I know a lot of men and women are grateful for it.
Your simple call to action today is to join the Facebook group for men. I've made it very easy for you. The link is at the very top of the show notes. You click on that, you'll be in it in 10 seconds. This is your home to connect with over 500 men from around the world who are living an intentional life, building a future they can't wait to live into, exploring how to live a high performance and optimized lifestyle, and connecting with other men who are like-minded, where we are sharing our favorite books, breaking down the obstacles of our daily lives, and then connecting on some of the deeper parts of our lives that we can't share with the average men in our lives, at least not right now. So at the very top of the show notes, click on the link to join the Facebook group for men, and we'll see you in there.